Today we are looking at a question that uses the words positive and negative and was seen in Ahmedabad, India this past week. If you find this video helpful, I encourage you to go to my blog at IELTSIELTS.com and my chat website at IELTS-chat.com. Let's read the question together. Nowadays, people are spending less time with each other. Do you consider this to be positive or negative? Give relevant reasons and examples to justify your answer. This essay question presents the three standard parts as usually seen in IELTS Task 2 questions. The first section is some kind of background. So here we're given a little bit of information regarding what we're going to be writing about. Nowadays, people are spending less time with each other. This is followed by some kind of question. Do you consider this to be positive or negative? I often receive emails from students online asking me whether IELTS questions that use words like positive or negative, advantages or disadvantages, benefits or drawbacks, whether these kinds of words dictate that a student should write a discussion style of essay. And that's actually not the case at all. As you can see in the question, we're simply being asked what our opinion is. Do we think this is a positive thing, or do we think this is a negative thing? Or do we think this is both positive and negative? So when it comes to writing our response, we do not need to write in a discussion essay style. We can write in either a discussion essay style or an argument essay style. Now, if the question was to were to say, instruct us to discuss both sides, discuss the positive and negative aspects of this statement, that's different. Then we are being told directly that we need to write in a discussion essay format. Now, the third part of the question is the instruction area, and here we are being told, give relevant reasons and examples to justify your answer. So as you can see, there is no part asking us to discuss anything. We're simply being told that we need to include examples, and we need to use these examples to prove our point of view. So, now to respond to this question, my advice is to write in an argument essay style, which is the more straightforward essay style, and the essay style that will be less likely to cause us to make small errors in our wording. So let's start our essay together. Now, I think most people would agree when we look at the statement, nowadays people are spending less time with each other, that this is something negative. I don't know how spending less time with people is a positive thing, but maybe somebody can think of an argument for that there. But, you know, looking at this, to me, it seems pretty clear that we would write an essay that refutes this point. So if we think of some ideas proving that spending less time with other people is negative, perhaps one could be that spending less time with people could be damaging to a family. So, so an example that comes to my mind is the sort of culturally accepted practice, particularly in the West, of sending elderly family members to nursing homes. So, you know, this, I mean, not necessarily that that's isolating them completely, but it is sort of, you know, isolating them to a certain extent. And maybe we could say that this is negative for the health of the family unit. Perhaps another point could be that less interaction between people is negative for a person's mental health, perhaps. Recently I read something about a cultural development in Japan called otaku, which is OTAKU, where particularly youths, I believe, at least in this report that was talking about people in their teens and 20s mainly, who spend extremely long periods of time at home and do not leave their home, perhaps for months or in some cases even years, and that often these people develop mental abnormalities that are diagnosable by a doctor. So these are real, you know, mental problems that people are developing, and I think we could draw the conclusion that this comes as a result of not spending enough time, you know, interacting with other people. So maybe, you know, those could be the 2 points that we use to support our essay in refute to this statement. So let's get started. Let me insert a page. So let's see here. So we want to start with sort of a background statement. And I think that the most obvious thing to start with is some kind of link between the growing trend of people spending less and less time together and the growth of technology. So as technology increases and its use increases, there's sort of a negative correlation with face-to-face communication. So I think in our essay, I mean, we don't want to say that technology and the development of technology is a negative thing, but maybe we could word it more as that, you know, the development of technology indirectly leads to a few negative social developments, one of them being perhaps that people are becoming more and more isolated from each other. So let's maybe start with something like with the advent of modern technology. People all over the world are interacting directly with each other less and less. I'm just going to change advent to with the progression of modern technology. People all over the world are interacting directly with each other less and less. So now maybe we could just say, you know, like we were saying before, that it's not necessarily the technology that is bad, but more so the problems that the technology leads to indirectly. So let's say something like, although there are merits to the technology that accounts for this change. So we're saying that, I mean, you know, the technology is even though the technology is good, it is argued that the progressively what's going on here? Progressively less time people spend with others has more negative than positive ramifications. Okay, so we're just sticking in here a quick thesis, responding directly to our essay question. Now, you remember the essay question said, you know, do you think this is more a negative thing or is this more of a positive thing? And we're saying very clearly that this is more negative than positive. Now, the only thing that we're doing that's you know, a little bit different than usual is that we're sticking in this little phrase here just to point out that we don't think technology is bad. You know, what we think is bad is the problems that come from social isolation, and often social isolation comes from technology, so it's sort of an indirect line. So although there are merits to the technology that accounts for this change, it is argued that the progressively less time people spend with others has more negative than positive ramifications. So anybody reading this essay so far, they know exactly where we stand on this issue. Can you see this is so clear? The essay is stating its purpose very clearly in this sentence. And when our examiner sees this, they will be very clear as to where we place ourselves in this argument. Now let's share our points that we're going to discuss. So just stick in here, this will be driven by analyzing how, and then we'll call it face-to-face communication is necessary. Now, we were going to talk about family, so let's say necessary in maintaining family, and we'll say maintaining relations within the family, and how it can help treat and prevent mental disorders associated, we'll just say with isolation and loneliness, we'll say. Okay, so let's go back and read through this sentence together. This will be proven by analyzing how face-to-face communication is necessary in maintaining relations within the family and how it can help treat and prevent mental disorders associated with isolation and loneliness. So we've stated the 2 points that we're going to use to support this position. Now, anybody that reads this introduction paragraph, they feel that they understand exactly what we're talking about. So they feel that they've had a good preview of what the essay is going to present. So now let's go to our first supporting paragraph. Now, as we said, we're going to talk about family and the importance of communication, real communication, face-to-face communication for the sake of family. And like I said, I was hoping to use the example we came up with of the elderly and how, you know, there's this increasing trend for the older members of society to be kind of isolated in an old age home, and we're just going to use this as an example, showing how this is, you know, it's not very healthy for the overall communication that occurs within a family. So let's start perhaps with something like firstly. So now we'll say cultures that justify the reduction of communication time between family members do, we'll say, more harm than good. Okay, so let's read this again. So firstly, cultures that justify the reduction of communication time between family members do more harm than good. Now the cultures I'm talking about are, of course, to begin, you know, most Western cultures where it's pretty typical to have family members not as, you know, still close in many ways. I mean, like friends, but I find that Western families typically tend to have each member of the family operating kind of more as an individual unit than in, say, you know, Eastern countries. At least that's been my experience so far. That's not true for everybody, of course, but it's true for many. So cultures that justify the reduction of communication time between family members do more harm than good. Now let's use an example. So for example, so we'll just use our example of Western culture. So we'll say, for example, in most Western countries, the elderly, and typically it's the elderly that don't want to live with their children, not so much the other way around, but the elderly fear, we'll say fear becoming a burden, burden on their children. And thus opt to establish residence in a nursing home. Okay, so for example, in most Western countries, the elderly fear becoming a burden, change on to their children, and thus opt to establish residence in a nursing home. Now, what we want to do is we want to show that that this decision to have the elderly members of a family move to a nursing home, which is somewhat isolating, we want to show that this acts negatively and this influences the family negatively. You know, if we do this, then this supports our thesis and makes the overall strength of the essay greater. So, now I think we could try something like all too often. Oh. The isolation they experience in this new living arrangement causes rifts between family members, a development that would be that would not happen were they to live with their children. Okay, so we'll just take that discussion sentence again. All too often the isolation they experience, they being the elderly, in this new living arrangement, this being the nursing home that we talked about before, so you can see we're using cohesion here, causes rifts. Now, if rifts is a new word for you, rift is sort of like a division or a separation. So rifts between family members, a development that would not happen were they to live with their children. So all we're saying in this sentence is that it's clear that people who are elderly and who move to a nursing home tend to have less communication or less, their family tends to have less family health, can we say, than those families where the elderly live together with the rest of the family. Okay, so we're just showing that this is indeed a problem. So basic face-to-face communication is something that is critical for the wellness of family. Now, the last sentence in this paragraph simply needs to link us back to our thesis. So let's just tie it up thus. Maybe we can say the negative effects spending little time with others can be seen. Okay, so you remember the ultimate point of our essay is that we're trying to prove, you know, that a lack of communication with others is negative. So here we're just tying back in, thus the negative effects of spending little time with others can be seen. We're just saying that this example has shown it really, that I mean, there's nothing positive that came out of that in terms of the health of the communication of a family. Now let's go on to our second supporting paragraph, and I'm going to insert a break here. Okay, now this second supporting paragraph, we're talking about a person's health and how that health is sensitive to the amount of interaction they have with other human beings. And we're going to use the example of the otaku culture in Japan, and how, you know, in a number of cases this has led people to experience health problems. So, secondly, people who are unable to have regular discourse with other human beings are often at risk of developing mental disorders. Okay? So people who are unable to have regular discourse with other human beings are often at risk of developing mental disorders. In Japan, for instance, a cultural movement referred to as otaku. I'm not sure if I should capitalize that, to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure that should be a capital O, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, I'm going to capitalize it. In Japan, for instance, a cultural movement referred to as otaku is often at the source of such problems as, now I believe the ones that were mentioned in an article that I read were anxiety, was probably depression, and we'll say depersonalization. Okay, now let's just clarify that otaku people really have very little interaction time with other human beings, face-to-face interaction time. So let's say otaku people are characterized by as those who spend the article I read, it was months or even years at home, refraining from contact with the outside world. Okay, now let's just try to tie this into the idea that this, because this causes health problems, then the idea that people who refrain from interacting with other people, this entire subject should be seen as something that is negative. So, so as this lifestyle is often the cause of various health problems. The negative results of social withdrawal can be seen. Okay? So we're just saying, look at these people. They go for extended periods of time without interaction with others, and they develop mental disorders in many cases. Thus, it can be concluded that a lack of interaction between people can cause a person's health to suffer. Okay, let's read the paragraph together once from the top. Secondly, people who are unable to have regular discourse with other human beings are often at risk of developing mental disorders. In Japan, for instance, a cultural movement referred to as otaku is often at the source of such problems as anxiety, depression, and depersonalization. Otaku people are characterized as those who spend months or even years at home refraining from contact with the outside world. As this lifestyle is often the cause of various health problems, the negative results of social withdrawal can be seen. Okay, so we just introduced the topic, we gave the example, we discussed how the example shows the topic to be real. So I mean, we said that social withdrawal can cause health problems, but I mean, then we really showed it with an example, and then we show the link between these two things, and then finally we just make a link back to our thesis, and that's the conclusion of this paragraph. Now let's go to our conclusion paragraph. So after analyzing the manner in which isolation harms family and human health, it is clear that this is a cultural, say, trend that should be recognized as negative in nature. After analyzing the manner in which isolation harms family and human health, it is clear that this is a cultural trend that should be recognized as negative in nature. Okay. So maybe finally we can just say that, even though we cannot change the world and the way that technology is developing, even though we can't do that, we still hope that the importance of social interaction will never be forgotten. Maybe that's a good way to conclude our essay. So kind of just with the hope that, in the future that things will, no matter what their changes, no matter what happens in the future regarding technology, that people will still recognize that face-to-face communication is necessary for human beings. So let's just start with an although little can be done regarding the development of technology. It is hoped the need humans have for direct communication with each other will never be forgotten. Let's just take that one sentence again. Although little can be done regarding the development of technology, it is hoped the need humans have for direct communication with each other will never be forgotten. Okay, so that's a nice way to finish our essay. Now let's go back up to the top and read the entire essay through. Make sure I Haven't made any mistakes. Okay. As we read, try to make mental notes of the different areas that link together. We use lots of linking phrases throughout the essay. I'll point out a few as we go along as well. With the progression of modern technology, people all over the world are interacting directly with each other less and less. Although there are merits to the technology that accounts for this change. So this change, what are we talking about? We're talking about the sentence before. This is cohesion. So although there are merits to the technology that accounts for this change, it is argued that the progressively less time people spend with others has more negative than positive ramifications. Okay, that's our thesis. This will be proven by analyzing how face-to-face communication is necessary in maintaining relations within the family and how it can help to treat and prevent mental disorders associated with isolation and loneliness. Firstly, cultures that justify the reduction of communication time between family members do more harm than good. For example, in most Western countries, the elderly fear becoming a burden to their children and thus opt to establish residence in a nursing home. This whole thing here, establish residence in a nursing home, is just a fancy way of saying moving to a nursing home. All too often, the isolation they experience in this new living arrangement, which is the nursing home, causes rifts between family members, a development that would not happen were they to live with their children. Thus, so we're saying because of all this, because of this big example, thus the negative effects of spending little time with others can be seen. Okay, so you can see this is a link back to our thesis. Very nice. Let's go to the next paragraph. Secondly, people who are unable to have regular discourse with other human beings are often at risk of developing mental disorders. Now, my word secondly, this might seem like a very simple thing, but this word is very key to our essay. Here, we're linking to the other paragraphs in the essay and outlining that this is just one in a series of points. In Japan, for instance, a cultural movement referred to as otaku is often at the source of such problems as anxiety, depression, and depersonalization. Otaku people are characterized as those who spend months or even years at home, refraining from contact with the outside world. As this lifestyle, a little bit there, the otaku lifestyle, is often the cause of various health problems, the negative results of social withdrawal can be seen. Okay, again, once again, linking back to our thesis and showing our examiner how the entire essay is working as a large unit. After analyzing the manner in which isolation harms family and human health, it is clear that this is a cultural trend that should be recognized as negative in nature. Although little can be done regarding the development of technology, it is hoped the need humans have for direct communication with each other will never be forgotten. I hope that lesson was helpful. Good luck on your exam, and thank you for listening.